I'm Scott Lauber from the Boston Herald, and this is part one of our Red Sox offseason preview. We'll start where the Red Sox will start this offseason, and that is with the starting rotation. It's no secret after a last-place season and a year in which the Red Sox traded John Lackey and Jon Lester that they need to rebuild their starting rotation this winter. There are a couple of ways that they can do that. Conventional wisdom would be that they would have to go after a few top-of-the-rotation starters, and there are three pretty expensive free agents who fit that bill. Jon Lester himself, who the Red Sox know well, Max Scherzer, and James Shields. Now, all three of those guys are going to cost substantial money, and they're going to cost a commitment of years. In the case of Scherzer and Lester, probably 6 or 7. In the case of Shields, 4 or 5. The Baltimore Orioles, though, were proof this year that maybe you don't need a top-of-the-rotation guy in order to win. The Orioles won the AL East without an established ace, unless someone like Chris Tillman or Wei-Yin Chen or Miguel Gonzalez was someone that you really were counting on before this season. The question is, do the Red Sox really need that top-of-the-rotation guy? And I think one of the scenarios they may pursue is, while they will monitor the markets for Lester and Shields and Scherzer, that maybe they'll go after a younger pitcher with ace upside, somebody like Zack Wheeler of the New York Mets, who could be acquired in a trade for some of the prospects in their farm system. And while Wheeler might not be an ace in the conventional ace by the ace definition right now, that might be a track he's headed on, and he might give the Red Sox a little bit more bang for their buck down the road. Joining me now is fellow Herald baseball writer John Tomasi. And John, the topic is, do the Red Sox need to go out and get themselves an honest-to-goodness established ace to lead their rotation? I think they do. I think that the Orioles model, the one that worked for them this year, is not sustainable over the long haul. I'm not saying they were a flash in the pan or a fluke. I'm just saying that I think you need more than Chris Tillman to front your rotation if you want to be a long-term and sustainable winning team.
I agree with that, but I would look at it a little differently. I would say the question you have to ask yourself is, why do the teams that have gone the no ace route, why have they done it? Because they can't afford one. That's what it is. It's not that they looked at the landscape of the game, at the market, and said, this is the best way to go. We're going to go for a bunch of mid-level guys. No, those are the only guys they can afford. The Red Sox are not in that boat at all. They can afford anyone in baseball that they want. And that's why I think it's more important than ever to target those kind of pitchers. And I think you mentioned in your intro, I think a Zack Wheeler or a Johnny Cueto, I think that's the direction they have to go this offseason. Trade for a young guy that another team either needs to trade, in the case of the Mets because they have so many holes to fill, or the Reds because they're not going to be able to afford all of their starters. You take one of those guys, you sign him long-term, you use your financial muscle to your advantage.
Yeah, I'm not advocating throwing bad money after good and going and giving James Shields 5 years. I think if the price for him goes to 5 years, the Red Sox would be just as well to say, look, thanks but no thanks. I don't know, though, that they should draw a line on a guy like Jon Lester per se, because I think that no matter who you sign, if you sign one of those guys, that contract at the end is not going to look so good. And let's face it, we're talking about a rotation that needs more than one guy. I think there's room to sign an ace, a free agent ace, and also trade for a pitcher with upside who can become an ace, whether it's a Zack Wheeler, whether it's a Jeff Samardzija, somebody who they might be able to control, in Wheeler's case, for a few years, and who may end up being a little bit better value than the free agent guy.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing I would add to that is, yes, go spend on somebody big, use your money to your advantage. But the second guy, to me, doesn't have to be, you don't have to go get Scherzer and Lester or Shields and Scherzer, I think the second guy can be that next tier pitcher. You just have to identify the right guy. The teams that we're talking about, there's certainly some merit to what they've done. You can build a solid top to bottom rotation the way the Royals have, the way the Orioles have, and beyond the number one, I think they need a true legit number one. But beyond that, I think you can sort of mine for whether it's a Justin Masterson or somebody like that who's coming off a terrible year, but maybe you see rebound potential. I don't have any problem with them doing that.
A Brandon McCarthy, Justin Masterson would be free agent options. A Mike Leake, a Zack Wheeler would be trade options of younger guys who may have upside for longer periods of time. And I think one thing that we can't really lose sight of here is that what made the Orioles successful was they had depth, and that's what made the Red Sox rotation successful in 2013 is they had 6 starting pitchers who they could rely on and count on. The back end of that rotation was pretty good, and when Clay Buchholz got hurt middle of the year, you had Felix Doubront and Ryan Dempster, and then later on Jake Peavy. And I think that's what made the Orioles so good. It wasn't just Chris Tillman; it was Tillman, Gonzalez, Chen, Bud Norris, and Kevin Gossman, who has the best stuff of all those guys. And the funny thing is, the ace, quote-unquote ace, that they went out and got, Ubaldo Jimenez, turned out to be their worst pitcher.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example of why you don't just run out willy-nilly and spend money on someone, the best guy out there. You have to target the right people. And, I do think the Red Sox have the right guys in charge to make those decisions.